Good afternoon. My name is Margie Johnson, and I'm delighted to share with you today some of the research that I did on student listening behavior based on chapter 2 of our textbook. This textbook has a fantastic definition of listening. It encompasses 5 particular facets that I thought really was comprehensive. And so based on our author's definition, I did some research and would love to share that with you today. This topic is particularly interesting to me, listening. I'm a mother of 3, but I also teach middle school, and I am in a classroom of 7th graders all day, and you can imagine that it is very difficult at times to get full engagement from them, and it is particularly interesting to me as to how to help motivate them to do that. It's a skill that I believe many adults are lacking today, and so I'm hopeful that by my research and by continuing to keep this idea before me that I can help them be better listeners as adults, and that will help them grow in their relationships. So our textbook authors give us 5 different parts of this definition. I want to share them with you. We're limited in how we can interact, but I had some words I thought would be helpful for you to just remember the different parts of this definition. They talk about that listening begins with this idea of sensing, and we have a sensory system that for some of us is even more heightened than others, and this is a very important part of our listening process. The next word is, or the next area is attending, and this also is a really important piece. It might be the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of probably where the most work lies for students, for us as people who try to listen and do that well. So we'll talk about attending. The next word is interpreting, and this is sort of this is where various abilities, experiences come into play. And so when we listen, what do we do with that information? That is what our authors of our textbook mean when they talk about interpreting. Then we remember. How do we remember? Can we remember complex things? When we're listening, how do we process and then store what we're hearing? And lastly, responding. Responding is an important part to listening as well, and we'll talk about that as we go. So when we talk about sensing, we're very aware of things around us. We're aware of sounds, we're aware of smells, some more than others. In middle school, you can imagine that is something I struggle with regularly. But it's true, we're sensitive to smells, to sights, to sounds. And in a classroom setting, there are so many things going on. And so a lot of my research showed that when we can give an atmosphere that is quiet, or at least quieted, that we can give an atmosphere that's as quiet as we can, that we can give some mental space in our talking, that we can eliminate other sensory things. Maybe all the posters on the wall can be too much. What can we do to help our students eliminate the distractions? In one of the articles that I read, it talked about how we have to clear our brain of the activity that's happening. And our brain does a good job of sort of setting that back so that it can focus on the current, most important stimuli at the moment. But especially for young people, we can really help them do that by eliminating as much of the distractions as we can. There's a movement today, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, of mindfulness, and many classrooms are using it as a way to just center and be quiet, to give ourselves a moment to order our own thoughts before moving in to what's before us. The next facet is attending, and this is a really tricky thing. The power of attention that a person has is present. We see it in a little person who's out on a walk and watches a caterpillar, make their way through the crack in the sidewalk for 15 minutes while the mom is thinking, okay, we gotta go. There's that innate power of attention that comes, and that's the way that God created us. We might even say that education tends to maybe even educate us out of that natural tendency. Attention is one of those things that as I was reading, it really talks about it's a skill that has to be developed, that while we have this innate power, as it begins to fade, as distractions come, as our mind continues to burn with information, how can we sort through those things and set ourselves up to give good attention to the new piece of information that's before us? Donna Wilson wrote a book called Smarter Teacher Leadership, and in that book she talks about this idea of helping them with a SLANT acronym. I picked up the wrong article, excuse me. She talks about this SLANT acronym that can really help students as they develop and try to remember how to, to try to help remember how to be a good listener. And one of the things she talks about is to sit up and give our best attention. The S stands for sit. L stands for look and listen. I can't remember the A because I can't find the article. But then the N stands, I'm coming back to the A if I remember it. The N stands for nod, that we would give some verbal feedback to what's happening. And then the T stands for to talk and to ask questions and to participate in what's going on. There are some simple mnemonics like that we could offer for some of our students to help them with attention. That's an important piece of listening. The next piece talks about interpreting. This section is very interesting for us as teachers because we have to remember that students operate on a schema. They have this framework that's already integrated into their minds, that as they receive new information, they run it up against what they already know, and they try to assimilate it in. And sometimes that's difficult if there's nothing neurologically there for them to hold on to. Sometimes new information can get lost and it just passes right through. So what we would hope is that we could know our audience, that we would see what do they already know? How can I tie this in to the lesson from yesterday? How can I know last year they learned about photosynthesis, so as I'm teaching them about more a higher level of botany this year, I could tie into what I know that they've already experimented with and learned about procedurally in years before. So knowing where our students have been, knowing our audience is a very important piece. Remembering, this is our next section. This is very difficult for some students. I have this great book I wanted to be sure to show you. It's called Make It Stick, and I picked this up at Barnes & Noble just because the title was fascinating to me a year or so ago. And there's so much good information in here, but it talks a lot about the process of remembering and how important it is for students to have to work. They have to mentally engage this new material. You can't just give them this information, they sort of take it in and listen, they fill out some quick multiple choice or fill in the blank worksheets, and you check off that they've done it in some way. It's not organic to them, it's not personal to them until they've done the neurological work to go and get that information, assimilate that information, talk about that information. So this book says basically that retrieval is the most effective way. They've got to go in there and get it. And so that's part of listening too. What are they going to do with that information? Lastly, as my time is running out, is responding. This is that piece of listening where we say, yes. We give some nonverbal feedback, and we smile, and we need to teach our students, ask, be involved in the conversation. Don't just sit there idly trying to take it in and then wait for some other time, but really engage and be part of the conversation. It's been delightful to be with you. I feel like I've gone 100 miles an hour, so I apologize. There is so much information to be shared. I look forward to seeing each of your presentations and hearing your feedback. Have a great day.